Gavin Titley's discussion of how social media exchanges are typified by what Sanjay Sharma calls a racialized info overload illuminates the difficulty of enhancing racial literacy in public discourse. Examples from contemporary media abound, from the question posed by television documentaries with titles such as "Is Australia Racist?" to social media explorations of the true intent of Irish actor Liam Neeson's admittance that he once wanted to find any black man to kill in revenge for the rape of a friend. Race really at play? The responses to Neeson shed light on how the not racism I propose characterizes how we speak about racism today goes beyond denial and pseudo-humanistic declarations of colorblindness. Not racism entails the constant redefinition of racism to suit white agendas and goes to the heart of the question of who gets to define what racism is. We are long past the days of post-racialism, theorized by Eduardo Bonilla Silva and others. Today, defining racism has become a site of political struggle. Neeson's story is but one example, but for Gary Young, it had a sharpening effect. The next time someone asks me why I have a chip on my shoulder, I need no longer brush the question away with disdain. I can say with all sincerity, because there may well be an Oscar-nominated actor out there who wants to kill me, so I have to be alert at all times. The fact that Neeson asked his friend the colour of her attacker's skin can only be understood against the centuries-old role that black male sexuality plays in the justification of racism in general and lynching in particular. In contrast, others applauded Neeson for divulging a 40-year-old story that he could easily have kept hidden as an uncomfortable but useful exercise, eliding the fact that his publicists considered that the fantasy about murdering a black man was an acceptable narrative to draw on to promote the revenge film in which he stars, Cold Pursuit. One African-American conservative columnist, for example, felt Neeson uttered uncomfortable truths about himself and his own prejudice, as opposed to what she calls the extremely unhelpful PC script of white guilt. The dominant view expressed in the dismissal of Young's fears as unhelpful political correctness is that leaping to accusations of racism is needlessly denunciatory. However, this is only possible if racism is treated as just another opinion among a diversity of viewpoints, which avoids the uncomfortable truth that Neeson had unconsciously or otherwise absorbed the history of white supremacism and thus calculated that he would be able to kill and, by deploying the legal cover of self-defense, to get away with it. The adjudication of whether a statement, an action or a process is racist in our mediated public culture eschews engagement with what race does as a discursive and performative regime in these scenarios. The discussion of whether someone like Neeson is racist happens in unconscious comparison to hegemonic accounts of what racism is and what a racist looks like. Neeson's admission is itself proffered as proof of his not racism. "I'm not racist," he told Good Morning America. "I'm a fairly intelligent guy, and that's why it kind of shocked me when I came back to Earth." The quest for personification on both sides of the argument, those for whom Neeson has offered us a teachable moment about what the universality of revenge, and those for whom he epitomizes the racism lurking behind urbane civility, bypasses a more nuanced analysis of the landscape in which these events play out. In this terrain, the question of who can control the definition of racism has grown in importance almost as a function of the lack of control that many racialized people have over the determination of their life course. This chapter argues that the dominant conception of racism relies on a Eurocentric formulation that is unable to fully encapsulate the effects of racial rule and the logic it bequeathed on social structures and consequent individual lived experience. Racism, as I shall show, was first coined to describe a problem internal to Europe, rising antisemitism in the context of 20th century European fascism. At its origins, the term racism did not apply to the colonial domination that existed in parallel with these intra-European political developments. And in some cases, as we shall see, a commitment to fighting racism in Europe comfortably coexisted with the belief in the racial inferiority of colonized peoples. I do not wish to discount the fact that since first entering the lexicon in the late 19th century, racism has been explained and theorized in many useful ways. However, what I suggest in this chapter is that we need to interrogate its origins in order to understand what it is possible to do with the dominant explanation of racism, that it is a moral wrong based on bad science. This perspective yields a thin understanding of racism as aberrant behaviour, measurable and punishment in individuals, a view which in turn lends itself to becoming something that can be expressed by anyone, regardless of how they are racialized.